Three rivers carved their way across the early medieval world, each carrying a different current of blood. They did not know one another, they did not speak the same tongue, yet their paths were already bending toward a single point of convergence. History remembers their kingdoms, but blood remembers the truth. From the frozen north rose the first river, a river of iron, oath, and ambition. Rurik laid the foundation, Igor pressed outward, Sviatoslav carved fire into the map, Yaropolk fought for a crown that slipped through his fingers, and Yaroslav the Wise shaped the bones of a nation. This river teaches that kingdoms are not born, they are forged. The second river came from the steppe, a river of movement, hunger, and survival. Almost led a people who refused to vanish. Arpad carried them through fire and famine, and Taxoni anchored them in a land that would one day bear their name. This river does not flow gently. It runs wild, unpredictable, unstoppable. It teaches that survival is not a gift, but a choice made again and again. The third river flowed from the lands of Charlemagne, a world of scribes and courts, treaties and fragile borders, a world where power was measured not only by the sword, but by the pen. This river is deep and steady. It carries the memory of laws, languages, and legacies. It teaches that civilization is not inherited, it is built, word by word. For centuries, these rivers ran apart, but history bends currents toward one another. A marriage forged to secure peace, a war that forced two peoples into contact, a migration that brought strangers face to face, a succession crisis that bound families who never meant to meet. Bloodlines do not meet by accident, they meet because history demands it. Now step back and look at the world from above. Three rivers, three bloodlines, three forces that shape the medieval world. And at their meeting point, a single lineage that carries all three. Strength from the north, fire from the steppe, memory from the west. This is the Trinity of blood, not three stories but one, not three destinies but a single inheritance carried forward through time, carried by the Magyars as they thundered across the plains in search of a homeland. And the western river flows steadily from the Carolingian courts, where treaties, marriages, and fragile alliances shaped the map of medieval Europe. When the three rivers meet, the parable ends, but the story does not. Because beneath the poetry lies something far more tangible. Real people, real choices, real bloodlines that collided not in legend, but in the living world. And this is where we cross the threshold. Out of myth, into history, the northern river takes form first. In the hands of the Rus princes whose ambition carved a kingdom from the forests and rivers of the east. The steppe river rises next, carried by the Magyars as they thundered across the plains in search of a homeland. And the western river flows steadily from the Carolingian courts, where treaties, marriages, and fragile alliances shaped the map of medieval Europe. These were not distant worlds. They were neighbors, rivals, sometimes enemies, sometimes allies, and in the pressure of war, migration, and survival, their bloodlines began to bend toward one another. A marriage sealed to end a conflict, a daughter sent across borders to secure peace, a prince whose claim to power required a union with a foreign house. These were the moments where history reached out and pulled the rivers together. And so the Trinity of blood becomes more than a parable. It becomes a map of the very people whose lives, choices, and legacies would one day converge into a single lineage. Their stories are not separate threads. They are the three strands of a rope strong enough to pull an entire era forward. Now let us follow those strands into the world they shaped. And so the rivers converge, not in myth, but in the living world. Their currents twist through war and migration, through alliances forged in desperation and marriages sealed in fragile hope. They carve their way through kings and wanderers, through daughters who carried treaties in their names, through sons who inherited both the burdens and the ambitions of their fathers. And as these rivers tighten into a single channel, the world around them begins to fracture. The great Carolingian realm splinters into rival kingdoms, borders crumble, and the nobles who carried the Western River find themselves standing in the ruins of an empire. It is in this moment of collapse, this opening in the armor of the West, that the Northern River begins to pour in. And at the edge of that broken world stands the first figure who will turn convergence into destiny. A warrior, an exile, a founder, the one they called the Walker, the story. Trinity of blood ends here, and the story of Rollo begins.